Detective Sarah Chen had seen enough horror in her 15 years with the Portland Police Bureau to believe she was immune to surprise. Child abductions, ritual murders, scenes so grotesque they required therapy just to process. But nothing in her experience had prepared her for the call that came in at 2:47 a.m. on a rain-soaked Tuesday in October. Detective Chen, the dispatch operator's voice trembled with barely controlled panic. "We need you at 1247 Maple Street immediately. I don't know how to describe what we're dealing with here." Sarah pulled herself from the warmth of her apartment, drove through the empty streets of southeast Portland where the streetlights cast long shadows through the persistent drizzle that defined the city 9 months of the year. The address led her to a modest craftsman house in the Hawthorne district, its windows dark except for the flashing red and blue lights of 3 patrol cars parked in the narrow driveway. Officer Martinez met her at the front gate, his face pale despite his usual professional composure. "Detective, I've been doing this job for 8 years, and I've never encountered anything like what's inside that house." Sarah studied his expression, noting the way his hands shook as he fumbled with his notebook. "What's the situation?" Neighbors called in a disturbance around midnight, so they could hear children screaming inside the house, multiple voices, maybe 6 or 7 kids cry for help. "But here's the thing, Detective. This house belongs to Marcus Webb, 43 years old, unmarried, no children. Lives alone, works as a night janitor at the downtown office complex." The first chill of unease crept up Sarah's spine as she approached the front porch. The house seemed ordinary enough, well-maintained garden, painted shutters, the kind of place that would blend seamlessly into any middle-class neighborhood. But something felt wrong, a quality in the air that made her skin crawl with invisible insects. Where is he now? Inside, refusing to come out, refusing to let us in. "But Detective," Martinez paused, his voice dropping to barely above a whisper. "We can still hear the children, crying, pleading, calling for their mothers. But we've checked the property records, interviewed the neighbors. There are no children in that house. There can't be." Sarah pulled on her latex gloves and checked her service weapon, though she had no idea what kind of threat she might face inside. "Any history on Webb? Prior arrests, complaints, anything that might explain this?" "That's just it. Guy's clean as a whistle. No criminal record, pays his taxes, keeps to himself. Neighbors describe him as quiet, polite, maybe a little odd, but nothing that raised red flags." Until tonight, as they approached the front door, Sarah could hear them. Children's voices, high and desperate, crying out in terror from somewhere deep within the house. The sounds were muffled but unmistakably real, the kind of primal fear that activated every protective instinct she possessed. "Mr. Webb," she called through the heavy oak door. "This is Detective Chen with the Portland Police. We need to talk to you about the disturbance reports. Can you open the door, please?" The children's voices fell silent instantly, as if someone had thrown a switch. The sudden quiet was somehow more unnerving than the screaming had been. Then, from directly behind the door, came a man's voice. Deep, measured, with the careful diction of someone who had spent years perfecting his pronunciation. "There's no disturbance here, Detective. Just me, reading bedtime stories to my children." Sarah exchanged glances with Martinez. "Sir, our records show you live alone. Are there children in the house with you? Are they safe?" A long pause, then the sound of multiple locks being disengaged. The door opened slowly, revealing a tall, thin man with prematurely gray hair and wire-rimmed glasses that reflected the porch light like mirrors. Marcus Webb looked exactly like what he was, a middle-aged janitor with soft hands and stooped shoulders from years of cleaning office buildings. But his eyes held something that made Sarah instinctively reach for her weapon. "Of course they're safe," Webb said, his voice carrying an odd musical quality. "Would you like to meet them?" Without waiting for an answer, he stepped aside and gestured for them to enter. Sarah crossed the threshold into a living room that appeared completely normal. Clean furniture, family photographs on the mantel, children's drawings taped to the refrigerator visible through the kitchen doorway. The kind of domestic scene that spoke of happiness and normalcy. Except there were no children visible anywhere. "Where are they, Mr. Webb?" Sarah asked, her hand resting on her holstered pistol. Webb smiled, an expression that transformed his unremarkable features into something predatory and strange. When he opened his mouth to respond, the voice that emerged was not his own. "We're right here, detective." The words came out in the voice of a young girl, maybe 7 or 8 years old, complete with the slight lisp and breathless quality that characterized childhood speech. But the sounds were emanating from Webb's adult mouth, his lips moving in perfect synchronization with the innocent voice. Sarah felt her blood turn to ice. "Sir, I need you to explain what's happening here." Webb's expression shifted, his features rearranging themselves into a mask of confusion and fear. When he spoke again, it was in the voice of a different child, a boy this time, younger, maybe 5 years old. "Please don't let him hurt us anymore, detective. We've been trapped here for so long, and he makes us do things, terrible things." The voice cracked with genuine terror, the kind of raw emotion that couldn't be faked. But it was coming from a 43-year-old man, standing in his own living room, his mouth forming words in a child's voice while his eyes remained fixed on Sarah with an intensity that made her skin crawl. "Mr. Webb, I need you to stop this right now and explain what's going on." But Webb was no longer Webb. His posture had changed, becoming smaller, more childlike, his hands clasped together in front of his chest in a gesture of innocent pleading. "My name is Emma," he said in yet another voice, this one belonging to a girl of perhaps 9. "Emma Sullivan. I was walking home from school when the bad man took me. That was in 1987. I've been here ever since." Sarah's training kicked in, suppressing the supernatural terror that threatened to overwhelm her rational mind. She pulled out her notebook and pen, treating this like any other witness interview, even as every instinct screamed at her to flee. "Emma, can you tell me what the bad man looks like?" Webb's body language shifted again, becoming more animated, more childlike. "He looks like Mr. Webb, but that's not really him anymore. The real Mr. Webb is trapped too, somewhere deep inside where we can't reach him. The thing that controls us now. It feeds on our voices, our memories, our fear." Martinez had backed toward the door, his hand on his radio, but Sarah gestured for him to stay. Whatever was happening here, running wouldn't solve anything. "How many children are trapped here, Emma?" "7 of us. Emma Sullivan, Tommy Brennan, Lisa Chun, Michael Rodriguez, Amy Foster, David Park, and little Sammy Williams. We're all here, detective. All of us who disappeared over the years." Sarah's heart nearly stopped. She recognized some of those names from cold cases, children who had vanished without a trace over the past 2 decades, files that had gone cold, families who had never received closure. "Emma, I need to speak with Mr. Webb now. Can you tell him to come forward?" Webb's features contorted, his face cycling through expressions of pain and confusion. When he spoke again, it was in his original adult voice, but strained and frightened. "Detective, I don't understand what's happening to me. It started 3 months ago, just whispers at first, children's voices calling my name in the middle of the night. I thought I was losing my mind. Tell me about the first time you heard them." Webb rubbed his temples, his hands shaking. "I was cleaning the Meridian building downtown, working late shift like always. Found an old shoebox hidden behind a maintenance panel in the basement. Inside were personal items, children's things. A small doll, a class ring, photographs, hair ribbons tied with careful bows. Sarah felt pieces of a horrific puzzle beginning to align. What did you do with the box? Brought it home. Thought maybe it was part of some time capsule project, something left behind by previous tenants. But that night, when I opened it in my living room, the voices started. Webb's voice began to change again, slipping into the higher registers of childhood. He opened the box, and we could finally speak again. We've been silent for so long, trapped in those objects, waiting for someone to hear us. This was Emma again, speaking through Webb's adult mouth with a child's inflection and vocabulary. Emma, what happened to your physical bodies? The monster who took us, he did terrible things before we died. But something about the way he killed us, the rituals he performed, it trapped our souls in the objects he kept as trophies. We couldn't move on, couldn't rest, could only exist as whispers and shadows. Sarah's mind raced through the implications. If what she was hearing was real, if these were actually the voices of murdered children speaking through Marcus Webb, then she was dealing with something far beyond normal police procedure. Who was the monster, Emma? What was his name? Webb's expression darkened, his features twisting with a combination of fear and rage. His name was Richard Kellerman. He worked as a maintenance supervisor at various office buildings around the city for 20 years. That's how he found us when we were walking alone after school, waiting for buses, playing in parks near the buildings he serviced. The name hit Sarah like a physical blow. Richard Kellerman had been found dead in his apartment 6 months ago, apparent suicide, but not before confessing to multiple child murders in a rambling letter left beside his body. The confession had been dismissed by most investigators as the fantasy of a disturbed man, since no bodies had ever been recovered. Kellerman is dead, Emma. He can't hurt you anymore. But he cursed us before he died, Webb said, his voice cycling between child and adult registers. Performed one final ritual that bound our souls to the objects he'd collected, ensuring we could never find peace. We're trapped, detective, and now we're trapping him too. Sarah looked at Webb's face, noting how his features seemed to shift and blur as different personalities spoke through him. What do you mean, trapping him? Mr. Webb was innocent, just a lonely man who found our prison by accident. But the curse is spreading to him now, consuming his identity piece by piece. Soon there won't be anything left of Marcus Webb, just an empty shell that we inhabit. The horror of the situation was beginning to crystallize in Sarah's mind. Webb wasn't a perpetrator, but another victim, possessed by the souls of murdered children who were slowly erasing his identity from the inside out. Is there a way to break the curse? To free both you and Mr. Webb? Webb's body convulsed, as if multiple personalities were fighting for control. When he spoke again, it was in the voice of a very young boy, maybe 4 years old. My name is Sammy Williams. I was the last one he took in 1995. The monster said we could only be free if someone destroyed the objects that hold us, but it has to be done with fire, and it has to be done by someone who understands what we are. Sarah felt the weight of impossible responsibility settling on her shoulders. Where are these objects now, Sammy? In the basement. Mr. Webb built a shrine down there, but he doesn't remember doing it. We guided his hands while he was sleeping, arranged our prison the way the monster taught us it had to be arranged. Martinez finally found his voice. Detective, this is insane. We need a call for backup, get a psychiatric evaluation team down here. But Sarah was already moving toward the basement door, driven by instincts that had served her well in 15 years of police work. Whatever was happening here transcended normal criminal investigation, but those children's voices carried an authenticity that couldn't be manufactured. The basement was small and cramped, filled with the usual detritus of middle-class life. Storage boxes, old furniture, a washer and dryer humming quietly in the corner. But in the center of the concrete floor, someone had arranged 7 objects in a perfect circle. A small cloth doll with button eyes and yarn hair. A high school class ring too small for adult fingers. A hair ribbon tied in a careful bow. A toy car with 2 missing wheels. A children's book with a torn cover. A small cross on a delicate chain. A baseball card creased down the middle. The objects radiated cold despite the warmth of the basement, and Sarah could hear whispers emanating from them. Children's voices speaking in languages she didn't understand, but that conveyed universal emotions of fear and longing. Webb had followed her downstairs, his movements jerky and uncontrolled. "They want me to touch them," he said in his adult voice. "Every night they call to me, begging me to hold them, to give them the warmth of human contact. But every time I do, I lose a little more of myself. How much of Marcus Webb is left?" Sarah asked. Webb's expression cycled through a dozen different faces, child after child looking out through his adult features. "Not much," he said in Emma's voice. "Maybe 10%, maybe less. He's fighting so hard to stay himself. But we're stronger because there are more of us." Sarah pulled out her phone and called for backup, specifically requesting Officer Janet Morris, who had extensive training in crisis intervention and had dealt with similar supernatural cases in other jurisdictions. "Emma, if I destroy these objects, will you be able to move on?" "Well, Mr. Webb be freed?" "We think so. But detective, you have to understand. Once the objects are destroyed, we'll be gone forever. No chance to say goodbye to our families. No opportunity for them to know what happened to us. Are you prepared to make that choice?" The ethical implications were staggering. These children had been missing for decades, their families never knowing what had become of them. But keeping them trapped in their current state wasn't life. It was a form of supernatural torture. "What do you want me to do?" Webb's body straightened, his posture becoming more adult as Marcus Webb himself fought to the surface. "Please," he said in his own voice. "I can feel them eating away at my memories, my personality, everything that makes me who I am. I know you don't know me, detective, but I was a good man. I never hurt anyone. I don't deserve this fate, and neither do we." Emma's voice interrupted, taking control again. "We were children, detective. We had whole lives ahead of us, birthdays and graduations and families of our own. The monster stole all of that from us, and now we're stealing Mr. Webb's life without meaning to." Sarah made her decision. She climbed back upstairs and retrieved a bottle of lighter fluid from Webb's kitchen, along with a book of matches from beside his stove. Whatever the consequences, she couldn't allow this supernatural torment to continue. Back in the basement, she doused the circle of objects with the accelerant, the smell of petroleum filling the confined space. The whispers from the objects grew louder, more desperate, but also hopeful. "Are you ready?" she asked. 7 children's voices spoke in unison through Webb's mouth. "We've been ready for 28 years." Sarah struck the match and dropped it into the circle. The flames caught immediately, burning with unnatural colors, blues and greens and purples that had no place in ordinary fire. The basement filled with light that seemed to come from everywhere and nowhere, and the temperature dropped so dramatically that Sarah's breath misted in the suddenly frigid air. The objects burned quickly, consumed by flames that left no smoke but filled the basement with the sound of children's laughter, joyful and free and finally at peace. One by one, the voices spoke their names as they faded away. "Emma Sullivan." "Thank you, detective." "Tommy Brennan." "Tell my mom I'm okay now." "Lisa Chun." "I forgive the monster." "Michael Rodriguez." "I'm going to see my grandpa again." "Amy Foster." "The light is so beautiful." "David Park." "I'm not scared anymore." And finally, in the voice of the youngest, Sammy Williams, "I'm going home now." The flames died away, leaving only a circle of ash on the concrete floor. Marcus Webb collapsed to his knees, gasping and shaking, but when he looked up at Sarah, his eyes were his own again. "Detective," he said in a voice hoarse from strain, "I remember everything now. What they showed me, what they went through. Those poor children." Sarah helped him to his feet, noting that his color was already returning, his posture straightening as his own personality reasserted control over his body. "Mr. Webb, you're going to need extensive counseling to process what you've experienced. But I want you to know that you helped those children find peace. That counts for something." As they climbed back upstairs, Sarah realized that she would spend the rest of her career trying to write a report that captured what had happened in this house. Some experiences transcended official documentation, residing in a realm of faith and mystery that lay beyond the reach of police procedures. But 7 families would finally have closure, even if they never fully understood how their questions had been answered by a lonely janitor and a detective willing to believe in the impossible. Outside, the Portland rain continued to fall, washing the city clean under the pale light of dawn. This was another tale from the S.T.F. Horror Vault. If you felt the chill tonight, don't forget to like, share, and subscribe. New stories open soon. And remember, the vault is always waiting.